Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Olivia Thomas, one of the Housing Navigators in the Eastern region, and I'm joined by my Housing Navigator colleagues, Martha Beach from the Southeast region and Alexander Shannon from Toronto. Also joining us are members of the team from SHS Innovation, Langsi Dong, Nandita Bujur, and Christine Pacini. And from the Community Land Trust, we have Alia Abaya from the Circle Land Trust and Melinda Zatarik from Muskoka Community Land Trust. So we're very excited to share our Solutions Lab launch, The Power of Family. As Housing Navigators, we're always looking outside of traditional ministry-funded housing and services, and we're thrilled that our proposal was accepted as one of the 2024-25 National Housing Strategy Solutions Labs. Next slide. So we'd like to begin today by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of the lands that we are on today. As we meet today on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land and the 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. We are thankful to be able to work and live in these territories. We are grateful for the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who have cared for these territories since the time immemorial and who continue to contribute to the strength of Ontario and to all communities across the province. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harm and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can each in our own way move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So just a couple of housekeeping points. Your microphones will all be muted. You can use the chat box to introduce yourself and post any questions that you may have. We're not going to be answering the questions during the presentation unless they're technical, but after the presentation, we will be having a question and answer period. So the recording of this presentation will be shared with everyone who registered, and we'll also share a copy of the slides, and it will also be posted on the DSO YouTube channel. At the end of the session, there'll also be a link shared where you can sign up for additional information if you are interested. So on the next slide, we'll just show a quick overview of this session. So we're going to introduce you to the project team and the partners. We'll talk about the lab and the process. Then Circle Land Trust and Muskoka Community Land Trust will also give an introduction to Community Land Trust. And finally, we'll finish up with a question and answer period. But before we jump right in, we're just going to put up a poll. We would like to see who is joining us today. So we'll just give a minute for that. Perfect. And there's two questions on that. Sorry, I should have said, how familiar are you with land trust? But I see people are answering that as well. So let's give it another couple of seconds. Seems like it's slowed down there. So I see a lot of people are joining us from the developmental service sector and quite a few community members. That's great. And it's great that there's going to be some presentations by the Community Land Trust because I see not very many people are familiar with them. So let's jump into the presentation. I'll pass it over to Martha.
Thank you, Olivia. And thank you again, everybody, for joining us today for the launch of Extend a Family Kingston Solutions Lab Initiative, The Power of Family, Unlocking Family Homes to Create Pathways to Scaling Community Land Trusts. Before we begin, I'll tell you a bit about the applicant for this lab. Extend a Family Kingston is a developmental service sector agency that provides services and supports to individuals with a developmental disability and their families. In the Southeast region, Extend a Family is the host agency for Developmental Services Ontario, which is the access point for adult developmental services funded by the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, and Housing Navigation is one of those services. So we'll start with a description of what a Solutions Lab is, for those of you who may not be familiar. So Solution Labs are funded under the National Housing Strategy to tackle persistent and complex housing issues. The program provides funding and expertise and brings together diverse groups of people to apply an innovative problem-solving lens to affordable housing problems within the National Housing Strategy priority areas. In order to ensure the success of our lab, we'll engage a core team of partners, experts, caregivers, and families, and individuals with a developmental disability. The core team is made up of Extended Family Kingston, Surrey Place in Toronto, Service Coordination in Ottawa. When designing and delivering our lab, we'll work with an expert consultant, and we're happy to engage SHS Innovation. SHS provides development, innovation, and policy services for social purpose housing projects across Canada. DSO Housing Navigators will be part of the team as well and will provide a connection to interested families and individuals. Slide shows our key partners. So Olivia mentioned Circle Community Land Trust and Muskoka Community Land Trust. You'll see a presentation from these partners today. We also have RENA, the Intentional Community Consortium, and Ontario Agency Supporting Individuals with Special Needs to round out our team. As we work toward a solution, we'll also include key stakeholders such as families, caregivers, individuals with an intellectual and developmental disability, and we'll consult with legal, financial, and tax specialists. So what's our purpose of this launch today? Is to introduce you to this lab and to people who are interested in learning more about it, and to those who may be interested in participating. So that includes, again, individuals, caregivers, families, agencies, and other community land trusts, and interested community members as well. We'll also talk about our proposed solution, why this is a housing problem that needs a solution, and what we deem to be a successful outcome to the lab. And finally, to answer your questions and share ways that you can become involved. At the end of this presentation, we'll provide a link to our participation form so that you can tell us how and if you'd like to be involved. Unfortunately, not everyone who indicates an interest will be able to participate, but we will keep you informed of the progress of this lab if that's what you would like. So now I'm going to turn it over to Alex so that she can provide more information about the lab.
All right. So I'm going to provide some more information about the lab and what we're hoping to achieve. And as Martha mentioned, Solutions Lab program is a part of Canada's National Housing Strategy, and labs bring together diverse groups of people, like, for example, community members, service providers, housing experts, to find new ways to solve tough housing problems. And the labs create a safe space for people who want to share ideas, question ways of thinking, and test out new housing solutions. So, as housing navigators, we work with a wide range of people, including individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, their caregivers, housing providers, and community service agencies. And the idea for our solutions lab grew out of the many conversations we've been having, especially with caregivers who are worried about finding safe, stable, and supportive housing for their loved ones with intellectual and developmental disabilities. For the purpose of our lab, we are going to be focusing on two main challenges. The first challenge is the lack of supportive housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Many people with intellectual and developmental disabilities still live at home with aging parents or caregivers and don't have good, timely options for moving to more independent housing that meets their needs. We want to note that the outcomes of our lab may be useful more broadly. So, for example, others who require or benefit from supportive housing, or seniors who may wish to age in place. However, the activities of our lab will focus primarily on people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And the second challenge that we're hoping to address with our lab is the barriers that community land trusts often experience in getting started and expanding the number of properties they hold. So we will hear later in the session from our community land trust partners. And we're going to see that land trusts are becoming more common across Canada. However, many don't have the finances to buy properties. And when they do own land or buildings, it can be hard for them to continue to grow in a cost-effective way. So, with our lab, we want to find a win win solution that will increase long term and stable supportive housing options for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, while supporting the growth of community land trusts and the community housing sector. Our aim is to create pathways to allow community land trusts and possibly other community housing providers to acquire properties in a timely, lower cost transaction, whilst allowing caregivers to unlock equity from their home to be able to cover the cost of some of the support their loved ones will need to remain living in the home. So, we're planning to create these pathways by bringing together people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, caregivers, housing providers, service agencies, and others from across Ontario to create a deal structure or the plans and tools that will be needed to help families and housing providers work together in a way that benefits everyone. An important part of our solution is creating a financial model that works. And to do this, we will engage financial and real estate professionals along with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, caregivers that own property, community land trust, and supportive housing providers to create a financial model that will make it possible for caregivers who own property to transfer that property to a community land trust while ensuring long term affordability for the residents who will live in the home. And the scenario may also provide opportunities to renovate or even add units to some of these properties. We expect that we will explore a variety of different financial approaches, as well as tax incentives and revenue generating options, in order to create a financial model or models that support the goals of our lab. Another important part of our lab will be to work closely with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, caregivers, and support providers to propose ways to create an operating model through agreements with support agencies to address the long term support needs of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So, to give a very basic example scenario that demonstrates our proposed solution, um, a family might transfer their home to a community land trust. And then their family member with a disability continues to live in the home with all the arrangements in place to make sure that the model will last long term, remain affordable, and will meet their needs into the future. So, our aim with this lab is to consider and test different possible scenarios and arrangements to ensure that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities can live in affordable housing of their choice that meets their needs. Our desired outcome is to be able to co create legal and financial support models and tools to give caregivers, community land trusts, and support agencies the confidence and ability to come together to create new supportive housing opportunities that will last into the future. And we also feel that there is a strong opportunity that our solution will be able to be scaled and replicated across different communities and contexts in Canada. So next, I'm going to pass things along to Langxi Dong from SHS Innovation, who will talk about our lab processes.
Thanks, Alex. I'm Langxi, as Alex introduced, and we are the innovation consultant on this project. I'll be talking a little bit more about our process as well as how you can get involved. So what makes Solutions Labs different from traditional research projects is the emphasis on collaboration and co-design. So what this means is we will deeply involve individuals with lived experience, family members and caregivers, land trusts, service providers, and other experts over the course of our project to help us define, build, and test the solution. Some of our principles and approaches include designing with, not for, respecting everyone as an expert in their own experience, and appreciating the diverse perspectives that we all bring, taking time to build trust and bring people along at each stage of the process, using creative ways to gather inputs from people with different backgrounds, showing instead of telling, and continuously validating our assumptions to ensure that we're on the right track. So this slide shows an overview of our process and our timeline. This initiative will run until July 2026, and it involves 5 phases of work. Right now, we've just wrapped up the definition phase, which is starting up the solutions lab, framing our challenge and the desired outcomes that we've just shared. Next, we'll be going into discovery. So we'll be diving into people's experiences, fears, and hopes, as well as challenging our existing assumptions about what the solution should be. This phase will involve activities like an at-home exercise for families and individuals, which we hope to be launching soon, as well as one-on-one conversations and a workshop in the fall. The development phase, we're beginning to explore solution ideas, focusing on designing the most ideal scenarios. So again, it'll involve more one-on-one conversations as well as collaborative workshops to bring the ideas together. The prototype phase is about building more detail and bringing ideas to life. When we talk about prototypes, these could look like mock-ups of tools that might be involved in the deal, storyboards and role-playing to show the process, as well as sample budgets and other things that might be involved in the solution. And by doing this, we'll be able to get feedback from experts and refine our solutions to ensure that they are practical and are financially workable. Finally, the roadmap phase is about creating a clear plan for a solution to be taken up and implemented in the real world. So we'll have one more collaborative workshop with all the folks and a closeout event that allows us to share our lab results with a broader audience. And so we're excited to talk about the different opportunities and ways for folks to become involved in this work. If you're an individual or family member who's interested in this model, we would love for you to share your lived experience with us by completing an at-home activity book that we'll be sending out for you to fill out at home. We're also recruiting people to be part of our deal participation team. So that's a core group of interested individuals and families, community land trusts, and service providers who will participate in the design of our solution through 4 to 5 engagement activities over the next year. And there are limited participation spots, so if you're interested, the sooner you can let us know, the better. We'll also have technical advisors bring legal, financial, tax, and other areas of expertise to help inform our solution design. And finally, if you're not able to or interested in an active participation role, we can keep you on our mailing list to receive updates and invites to public presentations like this one. And we will be sharing that participation form later in the webinar, so we hope that you fill it out and that you'll join us on this journey. I'll pass it to Olivia to introduce our land trust partners.
Perfect, thank you. So now that we know some more about the lab, we're going to hear from the community lab, our trust partners. So we'll start with Alia Abaya. She's the CEO of Circle Land Trust in Toronto, and I will pass it on to her.
Hi, thanks for having me. And I'm really excited that we're here at this stage. So Circle is a bit about our organization. Circle is a 600 plus single family scattered house land trust owners, meaning we have 600 single family houses across Toronto. And we property manage all these houses ourselves and also provide all the tenant services. And we do actually have one property that is similar to sort of like the idea we're exploring with this lab. So happy to share more about that, one-on-one in the future. So why this is a really unique opportunity, our land trust especially was founded by the tenants, and it was to preserve the fact that the homes were at the threat of sale to be sold in the open market. And so thinking of the families looking to protect their asset for the life of their adult children, this is a really great model to explore. Next slide, please. So what Circle can do is, knowing that every family's situation is unique, we can help walk through the flexible legal models that you'll engage with through the Solutions Lab, and knowing that the land trust is there and has a history of property management and capital asset management. It gives the families confidence that the home and the asset itself will be well taken care of and protected in perpetuity, essentially. That's the benefit when transferring to a land trust. Working with the DSO and supportive agencies, we'll be able to create formal care plans linked to housing arrangements, ensuring that caregiving and pieces like the financial management and property oversight continue once the family can no longer manage those pieces. And as well, we're mandated to adapt the house to accessibility. Slide, please. As part of our work, we've actually engaged in a 72 million capital repair plan on all our existing properties. So through a land trust, you have access to grants or loans or financing of an organization that has the capacity and ability and experience to sort of retrofit the house as the needs arise and is familiar with like ongoing maintenance. Estate planning and supporting transition. Of course, this is really important as you go through the process. If you participate in this lab directly, or if you're just benefiting from receiving the materials, being able to co-design a transition plan and think about how you want to transfer authority or power of attorney arrangements to prevent displacement of your adult child in the future. And also ensuring, I think an important question that I didn't put on this slide, but it's important for everyone to know, is that making sure that the organization, the land trust you might select, gives you the confidence that they'll continue on into the future and that they're stable, healthy financial organization. Next. And I'll wrap up with one example of what a scenario could look like. A model could transfer an asset to a CLT, or a CLT could purchase it, and it holds that house in perpetuity while the family retains the rights to the home. You could partner with a service agency to take on the care coordination. And as I mentioned, we have an example of a house in our portfolio currently that's using this model. And that way the adult child has the rights to use the house for the length of their lifetime. And that sort of fills the gap, addressing the two issues that Alex mentioned we were trying to solve for. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alia. We're really looking forward to working with you in Circle on this lab. So now I'm going to introduce Melinda Zatarek, the Senior Project Director for Muskoka Community Land Trust.
Thank you. We can go ahead to the next slide. So the Muskoka Community Land Trust has been around for, in some form, for at least 10 years, incorporated for about 3 years. And we are in the District of Muskoka, and we are in a rural environment, a small community. So that's one of the different attributes about the Muskoka Community Land Trust distinction. But otherwise, our mission is similar to most community land trusts, that we acquire and steward land for the purpose of developing and protecting permanently affordable housing, our social enterprise, and food security. Next slide. We started as an organization because we, as volunteers, have been working in the housing crisis that we've had here for a very long time, and looking to try to build sustainable solutions. The vast majority of our community members, despite us being the playground of the rich, that being our reputation in Muskoka, do earn median to very low income, and the housing affordability, even by a conservative assessment, is far below what few rents that are available actually convey here, and what it costs to operate and maintain a house. Next slide. While the projects that I will show you that we are working on right now are new builds, we also have a mandate and objective to renovate and acquire existing building to protect it from becoming unaffordable through the various means that houses can become unaffordable, through interest rate changes, family income changes, and family makeup changes, to be a few. One of our key objectives is to make sure that because of our lens of permanent affordability, and making sure that these homes and the land that they're on are community assets, or assets of the people who are living there for the community's well-being and our community members' well-being, not financial assets. we take that long-term view of the total cost of the building ownership and the land stewardship. And so environmental sustainability, climate impact, cost of energy are a top priority for us when looking at buildings and repairing them. And I know Circle has taken a similar approach, and it's done some amazing work in their and is doing amazing work in their renovations to that end as well. And we want to replicate it. Thank you. So we're excited about this project because we have been partnering from the very beginning with our organizations, several organizations, Community Living South Muskoka, Community Living Huntsville, and CARES in here have been key stakeholders in our organization, and meeting and supporting the communities that they serve is one of our top priorities as well. So excited to be part of this project and find better ways that we can be more successful at that. Next. The project we are most progressed on right now is about an 80-unit apartment building on a piece of property that the town of Huntsville is conveying to us. It's about 7.5 acres. We are in pre-construction on this project right now. So we have a design. We're hoping to break ground in the fall, and those units will be accessible in a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms, and then there'll be more 2 and 3 bedroom apartments in the subsequent phases of that build. Next. Again, total climate resilience is really important too. So we actually have engaged a climate resilience engineer who's helping us make sure that all of our decisions are made so that we ensure the 100-year longevity and affordability of these buildings. Of course, this is a community-led housing, so engaging with our entire community and making sure that we're meeting the needs equitably in our community and meeting the housing needs of those who are most vulnerable is our top priority. Next slide. I'm just going to show you, this is an example of another proposal that we have put forward to the town of Bracebridge. They were looking for somebody to address the housing needs of the community on a piece of property that was available for redevelopment. And that project was a partnership with Community Living South Muskoka and the YWCA to include not just accessible housing units, but also the wraparound social services supports and office space and activity spaces for those organizations to operate their programming. Next slide. So looking forward to the discussion and next steps of how we can find models that will work for our family members who need better solutions, not merely to move into an apartment or a space that we're building that will be appropriate. That might be appropriate for some families, but also to help maintain their home through some of the financing models that land trusts have access to as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melinda. Thank you for that. And thank you also to Alia. Okay, so we're going to go on to next steps here. So the next steps are, as I think Langsy mentioned, we're going to start working on an at-home exercise for individuals and families. So we hope to have that out in July. We're going to do some one-on-one conversations virtually in June and August. And then we will have that virtual discovery workshop in September. Also, we mentioned this participation form. Here it is. There's a link to this form right here. So we encourage you to complete it if you're interested in participating or just keeping informed. And as Langsy mentioned, if you're interested in participating, unfortunately, we may not be able to accommodate everyone who is interested. But you can also just say you just want to follow up on what's happening, keep informed of follow-up webinars like this. So just if you can fill out that form, that would help us know who wants to participate, who wants to know more. Over to you, Olivia.
So we're going to go over to the chat right now, and definitely if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I don't think we're really unmuting people right now just because the amount of people on here. And I'll go through the chat and then we will just direct them to the people who could answer them. So right now in one of the chats, and I'm going to direct us towards the land trusts, was could a property be transferred just in part? The example of that is that family homes are often the largest single asset. So for families with multiple siblings, how could they compensate for their portion if the property is transferred to a trust? So I'm not sure, Alia or Melinda, if one of you would be able to take that question.
Sure, I could start unless Melinda wants to go. Yeah, I think these are the really interesting, very unique and specific questions that are going to arise because every family situation is different, especially financially. And so I think those I can't answer like directly. I mean, in a way I can. Yes, it can be divided in a way. But how that works is something that we'll probably end up exploring through the lab. I think with the technical portion that our friends at SHS mentioned would be part of that solution. Yeah.
Thank you, Alia. And another question, Ali, maybe you can answer, is the transfer permanent and indefinite, or can it ever be transferred back to the original owners?
Yeah, so it typically is permanent. That's the idea. But it becomes a legal agreement, so you can sort of craft it the way the family intends. And again, it's very specific and designed to meet the needs of the family.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then definitely what we explore coming out of this solutions lab, all those different roadmaps that we're going to look at. Another question we have here is, what are the benefits of doing this versus a family land trust?
Yeah, so I think with the family land trust, you would have to appoint a family member as a trustee to sort of, because you're self-managing it, whereas a community land trust, it's governed by the organization. And so it's very similar otherwise, but I think the idea here is that if your family doesn't have someone who could facilitate that and act as the trustee and manage the house, and they're looking to like if the parents say are the caregivers and managing it now, and they're more planning for when they aren't able to, the land trust, community land trust sort of fills that gap if you don't have someone you can appoint as a family trustee.
Glad to get into that one because we always like family land trust. I don't know too much about that, so that's perfect. Thank you. Skimming through that. And then who will help on caregiving work to the adult with disability lives on the property? So I think maybe as housing navigators, Martha, we could talk about this. I can certainly start off, or if you want to.
And could you read the question again, Olivia? It just cut out.
Sure. Who will help with the caregiving to the adult with a disability who lives on the property?
Okay, perfect. You go ahead.
Sure. So I think when we're looking at the Solutions Lab, one of the things that we're thinking about is how it can be a win-win situation for the land trust, for the family with the property. And with that being said, like what if, just as, one example, what if the family was to sell the home to the land trust, for below cost, they would take that money back and be able to pay for that support with some of the money. The other thing was renting it back from a landlord, from the land trust. And just being able to sort of juggle around that money a bit and working with, like the land trust right now is managing the property, but it's also about pulling in support organizations, be it private operators or ministry funded ones, who can work with the land trust and the family to continue managing it. So that's sort of what we're exploring right now as looking at some of the solutions. Would you add anything to that, Martha?
And just again, you can see that in our partners because we have included RENA, we've included the ICC, that's Intentional Community Consortium, getting the agency perspective. How do they see their role, or could there be a role? And again, I think that's also when we do the engagement, what do the families need to ensure that not just the bricks and mortar part of this idea is satisfied, that the support side of it is acknowledged and worked on as well.
Perfect. And then there's just some questions, who's going to be receiving this presentation. We are going to be sending this presentation out via email, and there is links to people's email email addresses on that and contacts. On the presentation as well, there is a link to what Lanksy talked about, how people can become a part of this lab. So this is a participation, and you can definitely complete that. So that will be coming out shortly. Question here is, do you know if grants are available for people needing funding for housing on their own? So I'm not sure if this is related to the land trust, but I'm not sure if there's any funding that we could talk about where people are adding extra
Yeah,
secondary units. Sorry, Alia,
yeah.
go ahead.
It's not really relevant to this, but there were some funds previously about adding accessory units, at least in Toronto. I'm not sure where you're located, but I don't know if they're still accessible or not, but I think you could find that.
Yeah, there are some municipalities in our area as well that have provide some forgivable financing for people to build ADUs or turn part of their home into an apartment with the condition that it is affordable for, I think, a minimum of 15 to 20 years. Family members who are not charged any housing fees or charged minimal housing fees are eligible for that in our area as well. So it's not a requirement that you build an ADU in order to rent it out to someone. Just you don't know that you can build them intentionally for your family members, and just if you receive the funding, you cannot at some point turn it into a market rate rental.
I would certainly reach out to the DSO Housing Navigator in your area, whoever's asked that question. Certainly, if you let us know the area you're in, we can tell you who your housing navigator is, but they should have that information because it can be different in each region. So certainly reach out and see what's available in your region.
Just to answer this, one of the questions, a little bit of information on the who provides the support services in the buildings. One of the that 80 unit building that I showed you is not it's not exclusively a supportive housing building. It's a mixed unit housing. And one of the ways we're trying to facilitate support is we're providing office space and common rooms that service providers can use for to come in and meetings. So social workers that we work with could have client meetings in an office space outside of somebody's home, and provide other services that way, and or keep equipment on site that wouldn't necessarily stay in one person's unit. It's one thing that we're looking at.
That's great. There's lots of different things going on definitely across Ontario with the different community land trusts. So, and for someone to ask, could we use the people are in different townships and we're asking, there is different community land trusts across the province. So it's definitely, as we work on the solutions lab, we'll be talking to, more and more community land trusts. But right now, as we sort of work on that solution and some of the ideas. So I'm just going through the questions here. So someone asked, how does the support side avoid taking on the negative side of institutionalization? So I don't know, Alex, did you want to talk about that?
Alex just was frozen and she just joined, but you know what? Let me just make her co-host. If I can find her, and then she can, or Olivia, you can start with that question if you like, and then we can send it to Olivia.
Sure, I'll start with that. So I think when we're talking about institutionalization, we are talking about large places with many different people living together. And for some people, that's definitely not what they want. When we're talking about this, we're really talking about choice. Some people do want to stay in the family home. That's what they would like to do, and that's what their family members would like to do. So I think that's what takes it away from institutionalization as well. It's choice. When people were institutionalized, there wasn't a lot of choice out there. So this is giving people choice, working with different agencies. They can still use their passport funding. For people who are not in the sector, people do receive a minimum of $5,500 a year that can help to pay for a worker in the home or for some other participation in the community, essentially. So that's how I would say it separates from the negative side of institutionalization. I'm not sure, Alex, did you want to add anything to that?
I think the other part of it is that, like Olivia said about choice, but also kind of the whole point of this is that we haven't created the solutions, right? We have ideas about what might work. And so there really is a lot of room for conversation, whilst we will be creating tools and kind of frameworks to guide these conversations and the creation of these agreements. At the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion, a lot of negotiation involved in trying to create these deal structures. So that's the only thing that I would add.
I think this one might be a bit sort of subjective, just depending on your situation. Alia, maybe you can answer this, is how long does a transfer of property take to become or maybe join a community land trust?
Yeah, it actually doesn't take, I mean, the actual transfer itself doesn't take that long. It's more the build up, the deal structure, that pre-planning work that will take a while. But the transfer itself, the legal mechanism is very similar to a sale, essentially. So if you remember buying or selling a home, it's very similar.
And I think that leads into the next one. Someone asked if they can transfer a condo to the Circle Land Trust that only our adult child with a disability lives in forever.
Yeah, you can transfer a condo as well as a single family house.
Perfect. And I see, Melinda, you answered the question about the 80 unit building and like just, the mix of it. Just going down here. So one of the questions here is, how is capital unlocked to provide funding for services? How does an agency fund this? So I don't know, Martha, if you want to look at that.
Sure. I think, again, that's part of what we're working on, right? We have not figured out the solution to this, and we haven't also heard all the issues that could be with the solution, right? That's why we're bringing everybody together. How could it work? It could be that in some cases, people may donate their home to a land trust because they're able to do that. But in other cases, families may need to sell their homes. But the sale might have to be at a lower than market rate, right? Because with the way real estate is today, how could that be affordable for a land trust to purchase? And again, it has to be, as our presentation said, win-win. It has to work for the land trust and it has to work for the family. But if you're able to do that and take some funds out of the sale of your home, you can use those funds to purchase the supports that you need. So you would find an agency that could come in and support your family member in their home. But again, that's why we're bringing agencies into this question as well. How do they see that working? Could a support agency be partnering with a land trust? Who would fulfill those roles? But as for the financial side, it's possible that a family could be taking out some funds from the sale of their home to support the cost of support.
I think this will go back to maybe Melinda. It says the question was, or the statement, on Manitoulin Island, there's some nonprofit housing units, and they've been active for years and are having a difficult time increasing rent, and they need to increase because of inflation, buildings need repairs, etc. And these nonprofits are running out of funding options. So I guess this comes back to the community land trust. How are you able to stay, sustainable to make sure that these properties are maintained and keeping them affordable?
Yeah, that's a great question because, there's some sort of, macroeconomic issues at play here beyond our control in terms of the government stopping the funding that was key to development and maintenance of our not-for-profit housing sector in Canada in the early 90s. And so since then, it's been very, very challenging. The land trusts, one of the things we, and Alia has, I'm sure, lots of contributions to this as well. For our 80-unit building that we're proposing right now, or that we're in pre-construction right now, we are putting in as many checks and sort of asset lock type assurances to make sure that our operational ownership costs are as low as possible. And the financing that we are using, will meet our needs for, we're looking at the 100-year financial cash outflow modeling. And they will be mixed rate, but we also have our mission is to not have extortionist rents. There are people paying $2,500 for a studio apartment in Huntsville, which is ridiculous. That's not affordable for under any lens for anybody. So the key is all this upfront planning, basically to have those long-term projections so that we can plan for those risks and those costs as much as we can. But it's a real issue that we all face. I think the larger economic pressures are things we can plan for as best we can. Making sure that the land is not a financial asset, it is a community asset, is one of the strengths of the land trust to help protect the land. The other piece about our land trust and most land trusts is we do have a tripartite governance structure. So the people who are residents and living in the buildings that are stewarded by the land trust have a say and in the housing charges that they're charged and how that is delivered. And we're also looking at the feasibility of co-ops for some of our homes as well, where the co-ops help govern and find equitable ways to meet their pro formas and their financial needs without overly burdening their residents with housing charges. So it's a much more complex way of looking at it, but trying to be equitable to meet the financial pressures as best we can. So it's more of a democratic, bigger process.
Sure. Alia, would you add anything to that about how you're keeping rents affordable in Toronto?
Yeah, so our current portfolio is actually 100% committed to rent geared to income, so it's deep affordable. And we've mapped out all our capital work, so we know the current status of the properties and can project out the expected expenses over the next 20 to 30 years. And so we've very diligently budgeted our maintenance annually and then the capital expenditures, and we'd sort of apply the same process to any home that became part of the land trust, like general capital management and property management exercise. And for the one house that we have, for example, now, there's a family that sort of manages it, and because their adult child lives in the home, and they actually have roommates that the family vets, and everybody's rent is supplemented through a rent supplement agreement, and then they share the cost of the live-in caregiver. But again, that works for that dynamic. Everybody's situation will be unique, and that's sort of what you'll have to explore through the Solutions Lab. So it'll be exciting to see what options come out.
For sure. And then again, for land trusts, is a secondary property transferred to a land trust, does the owner still have to pay capital gains if it's a second property that's transferred?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, probably, but I think there's a good rationale there to find an exemption.
And that's definitely something, as we keep saying, exploring in the Solutions Lab. Someone asked, what happens when a person with a developmental disability living in the home passes? Is a home made available to others? So that's definitely something we've spoken about with like Alia before and everything. Definitely like if that home could potentially be a legacy that's passed on to people with developmental disabilities. And it all sort of comes down to the agreement that you make with the land trust and what works for you and both the land trust. Are homes in the community land trust, are they subject to property taxes still?
That depends on the local municipality and the agreement that you have. We are seeking and have expect to have housing property tax exemptions on the building that we are that I showed you, but we don't have a blanket exemption. Alia, I'm sure
Yeah, we have we've received property tax exemption for our existing properties because they're affordable housing. So because that, as long as you're keeping it in that affordable housing range, yeah, for us, they'd be exempt.
And then another question was, this is something that, again, that we've talked about. What if the property had 3 bedrooms? And, like the one individual comes with the house and there's 2 other bedrooms. Would the would the community land trust manage the rental of the other 2 bedrooms? Is that something that you would do?
Yeah, so that's similar to what's happening with the house in our current portfolio, but the family has a say because obviously, they want it to be a harmonious living arrangement. So.
And then there was, how would the ODSP be affected? I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Martha, but I don't think, or Alia, sorry, so you were going to say something.
I was just going to say that we do have tenants who are on ODSP. So.
And I would
I
assume
was
they
going
get
to
the
say
full
the
amount.
same. Sorry, Olivia. I was going to say the same thing. It shouldn't be affected. They will become a tenant and have all those rights of a maximum shelter allowance, which I think right now is $582. So it just depends upon the rent that would be charged in that particular scenario.
It'll be interesting to have that conversation because I know that so there are different ways of having housing charges that are considered rent or are not considered rent, fall under other financial tools. So it'd be interesting to see if there's any advantages for how those are treated in Solutions Lab.
One here, support is always going to be a part of this as well. Like we understand we are talking about the housing, but it is important for that support piece. So Alex, maybe you could talk a little bit about just like the waiting list for DSO supported services, like SIL, like supported independent living, tend to be triaged. How this will affect someone's chances of support when it appears they're in an emergency situation with housing, or maybe even looking at that from, how would DSO SIL supports could they be used for? For this kind of solutions lab, for this kind of project?
So I think there are no absolutes, there are no certainties that we can kind of speak to around this kind of a question, but absolutely something like a supported independent living worker or SIL hours, we call it in Toronto, is something that could feasibly be incorporated into this sort of a plan. And so that's a situation where a person has access to housing and benefits from support with daily living activities and kind of maintaining that housing arrangement. With regard to it's really hard to speak to how it would impact a person's priority for services. So when services are declared to the DSO, there's a process of determining, first of all, who's waiting for that service, what is the fit for the service that is available. And so with SIL hours, for example, at least here in Toronto, a person needs to be living independently. And not everyone who is waiting for supported independent living services would fit that criteria. And certainly, a person's circumstances can impact their priority for services, but it's not something that we can really speak to on a kind of case by case basis. When a person's facing more urgent, when we're talking about housing specifically, when a person is facing more urgent circumstances around housing instability or homelessness, it is true that is going to have an impact on a person's priority or need for housing services. But I don't think that, that would be a reason to not explore a scenario such as this. I don't know if Olivia or Martha, you have anything to add to that.
I think you summed it up well, Alex. Thank you. Another question, Ali, just going back to if someone does transfer the condo to the land trust, who pays the condo fees?
Yeah, so with the transfer, the ownership transfers, so all liabilities would transfer as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that answers a couple of them. And then another question, Alia, do land trusts mortgage the facilities to support repair or services?
It depends. Some might. For example, we have a 72 million capital repair plan funded by CMHC right now. So that's essentially a mortgage to bring all our houses up to a state of good repair. Every land trust will be different.
Thank you. There was a question, and I think we'll sort of get more into that as well. There was one of the questions coming up was one of the polls I say we did was, how familiar are people with land trusts? So maybe, I don't know if you could sort of summarize, I think we're coming to the end here, Alia. What exactly is a land trust? If you could summarize that up in just a couple of sentences. And I think it also just goes to show that maybe we'll be having another presentation just on land trust, just to sort of, to keep that neat, and especially as there's so much going on across the province with land trusts.
Yeah, Melinda actually shared a great link to the land trust network there. So it is a independent private nonprofit organization. They're structured differently. They all have board governance. The boards are all volunteers. Some boards have tenants. Some, like ours, don't have tenants on the board. Just sort of depends. I think that was the question. Yeah. Is that who is a land trust? Did I capture everything in that question?
I think so, yeah. It was just sort of, how to, just summarizing what a land
Oh, I
trust
think there was
is.
a point about how do you ensure that there's a strong organization, which is, I think, a really great question, because if you're considering transferring your asset to an organization to hold it in perpetuity, you want to make sure that organization's actually going to be around in like 50 years. So that's just due diligence. You can look at financial statements, look at the board, look at the makeup of the organization, how many assets they have, how many projects are in the works, things like that.
Not-for-profits, whether on provincially or federally incorporated, have to share their bylaws with you if you ask for them, as well as their annual financial statements. So you should be able to, and especially if they're engaged in potentially working with you on a home asset ownership structure, they would, prior due diligence would be hopefully the level at which they're looking to share information and be transparent with you, so that you can get a good idea of whether the partnership makes sense.
I think we've come to the end here, but I just want to give a chance to SHS team, Langsy. I know we talked a lot to the land trust during the questions, but was there anything your team wanted to add, or maybe a question that we missed that you wanted to touch on?
Thanks, Olivia. No, I don't think there's anything specific, but I think we're taking copious notes in the background to make sure we cover all these very specific questions as we go in the lab. So this has been great for us to, really begin that opening wide period of gathering feedback and perspectives. So appreciate it.
Perfect. Well, we're definitely, as Lucy said, she's taking a lot of notes, and we are going to try and get back to some of the questions that we weren't able to answer just during this time frame, and send it out with the slides or over the next week or two, just to try and make sure we capture everything. It definitely helps us create some of the solutions and what we chat about when we all get together, what other people bring to the conversation. So very important. So I think we just want to run one final poll before you leave. And it's just, will you be following the progress of this lab? Let's give it just a minute here. Perfect. I see it slowing down, and thank you. That's a really great turnout for people who will be following this lab, and we're really looking forward to sharing more information about it. And definitely sign up with the link that was provided, and the link is also on the slides that we'll be sending out later. And we look forward to meeting again and talking about what's come out of this. So thank you again for joining us today.